Welcome to 5 Minutes of Mime, the longest-running podcast dedicated to the performance art of mime. I am your host, S.E. Engerman. While the mimes are off for our winter recess, I thought I'd go back over some of my favorite episodes from this year and give you a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, rather than leave you with no new episodes until the new year, like the mimes wanted to do. Tonight we revisit episode 21, The Mathematician, from May 2017. The title was inspired by Tim and Tanya Chartier. Tim was a math professor who, along with his spouse Tanya, used the science of mime to teach the art of math. The performance that evening was a demonstration of the irrationality of root 2. We asked the listener to complete the proof for the case of root 3. There are several methods to prove this, including proof by contradiction. Suppose there exists a rational number r such that r squared equals 3, and as a rational number, r can be expressed as the ratio of a over b. And let's also suppose that a over b is r in its simplest terms. That is, the greatest common divisor of a and b equals 1, and that fraction cannot be further reduced. Another way of saying this is r squared equals 3, and a squared over b squared equals 3, and this can be rearranged to say a squared equals 3 times b squared. And now there are two possible cases to consider. One is that b is even. If b is even, then b squared is also even, and 3 times b squared is even, which means that a squared is even, and so a must also be even. But as we said previously, a over b expresses r in its simplest term, and that is, the greatest common divisor of a and b is 1. But if a and b are both even, then their greatest common divisor must be at least 2, which is a contradiction. The second case we must consider is that if b is odd, then b squared is also odd, and 3b squared would be odd, which implies that a squared must also be odd, and therefore a is odd. All odd integers can be expressed in the form of 2x minus 1, where x is some other integer. Well, let's substitute m and n in this case to differentiate between the expressions for a and b. So let's say a equals 2m minus 1, and b equals 2n minus 1. Using substitution, the equation a squared equals 3 times b squared becomes the quantity 2m minus 1 squared equals 3 times the quantity 2n minus 1 squared. Simplifying the binomials and balancing the equations, it reduces to the quantity m squared minus m times 2 equals the quantity 3n squared minus 3n times 2 plus 1. One side of the equation is an integer times 2, and so must be even, but the other side is an integer times 2 plus 1, so must be odd. This is a contradiction. An odd number cannot be equal to an even number. Whether we suppose b is even or odd, both lead to contradictions. Therefore, we conclude there is no rational number that when squared equals 3. The saying 3 is the magic number comes from the De La Soul song on the album 3 Feet High and Rising, 1989, and the Schoolhouse Rock musical short it inspired. Thanks to all our guests who joined the show this year. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at 5minutesofmime.com. Join the conversation on our Facebook listeners page, the 5 Minutes of Mime Quiet Storm, and on Twitter at 5 Minutes of Mime. Remember to visit the 5 Minutes of Mime store at TeePublic, tell your friends about the 5 Minutes of Mime playlist on YouTube, and leave a review for us on iTunes. From the 5 Minutes of Mime team and myself, S.E. Engerman, thank you for listening. Until next mime, good night.